Brilliant. So yes, just again to say good morning, everybody. My name's Louise and I'm the Programme Development Manager at London Funders. Thank you again for coming. So we're going to be chatting all things Propel this morning. You're going to hear from a few people, a little bit from me, a few from our funders, the colleagues over at the GLA. We're going to hear from Jade, who is a young assessor, and then also from Michelle and Maddie from Say Yes Mentoring, who've got a grant through Propel already to share a little bit about their experiences of moving through the Propel process and kind of what the grant means to them. It's worth flagging that we're here together for sort of 90 minutes or so. We probably won't cover everything in that time. It's going to be dead difficult to try and cram everything in. But what we are asking is that if over the course of the session you pop any questions in the chat, and if any questions in there really resonate with you or are things that you'd want to discuss as well, if you could like or add a little heart or a reaction to a question in the chat, and that just gives us a chance at the end to kind of get a sense of which are the most pressing questions. Put my teeth back in. But there's going to be loads of space at the end. This isn't just a case of, you know, us lecturing you or kind of, you know, speaking at you. It's very much going to be a dialogue at the end. We're going to cover quite a lot. We'll be chatting a little bit about kind of Propel and what it is, which for some of you is going to be familiar, maybe for some of you is going to be completely new. A bit about the New Deal for Young People mission and kind of what that means. We'll be talking about what we're looking for in applications, all the logistical stuff about how to apply, timelines, and the team that are here to support you with your applications and help you move through that process. We'll be talking in depth about the mentoring quality framework. We've already had some questions come through since announcing Propel, so make sure that's covered. And then we'll, of course, like I say, be hearing from Young Assessor and also Say Yes Mentoring, and then loads of space at the end for questions. If I could just scoot on, thank you. Skip past my name. So in terms of what is Propel, like I say, I'll keep this quite short and sweet, but ultimately Propel is a collaboration of currently 11 funders, all with slightly different aims, agendas, and kind of methods coming together to address systemic issues facing Londoners. Excuse me, and that's kind of managed, coordinated, whatever word we want to use, by London funders, where myself and Jess on the call are from. And it's not just, the next slide kind of covers exactly who Propel is, but it's very much focused, it's a 10-year programme, very much focused on addressing kind of long-term systemic change for folks in London experiencing kind of structural inequality. There's loads of information on the Propel website about kind of how we got to this point. Today probably isn't the best time to go into the nitty-gritty of it, but that's the kind of headline stuff, and we'll move on to the next slide to kind of talk through who is Propel. There's a list of funders there on the left-hand side. So we've got the City Bridge Trust, the GLA, National Lottery Community Fund, London Legal Support Trust, Trust for London, Paul Hamlin Foundation, Lloyds Bank Foundation, Mercer's John Lyons Charity, John Lang Trust, and Bloomberg, all of who have come together to invest collaboratively. I'm really struggling with the word collaboratively today, which is difficult given that I work in the collaboration team at London Funders. Propel, but it's not just funders. I think what's really unique about this collaboration is that it brings together funders, equity partners, again, who are listed on the screen there. And their role is very much about ensuring that we have the voices of the people who are being supported by Propel at the forefront. So they're involved in developing the application process, assessment process. They're with us kind of every step of the way. And then our other really key partners are our learning partner, Ivar, and a tech partner, Outlandish, who've helped us build this portal that we're receiving applications through. Where Ivar fit into the mix is they really support us to keep learning at the forefront of this funding programme. It's much more than just we dish out the money and you deliver projects. It's much more about how we work together as funders, as equity partners, as civil society organisations, and get a real sense of what the issues are that are facing London and the best way to address them. So for those who are successful, there is a kind of learning package that sits inside Propel, where we meet together regularly over the course of the grant and work together and learn together. And then, of course, the most important people involved in Propel are grantees. So in round one, which was announced just a couple of months ago, we funded 89 organisations across London. And you can see more in terms of who they are on the Propel website as well. Thank you. And then so in terms of kind of what it is that we want to achieve and the ambitions for Propel, it takes a village, right? And clearly it takes a village given the amount of people that we've brought together. But the idea of working collaboratively, which is very much at the heart of what we're looking to do, to address issues, as the slide says, are bigger than any one of us, right? It's a really, there's so much work to be done that leaving it to one funder is never going to be enough. So this idea of drawing together to bring on different areas of expertise and knowledge. Oh, someone can't hear me. Can I get a nod from people in the chat that can't hear me? I've got a note from Big House to say we can't hear you. Okay, great. Strange. Could somebody drop a message to Zoe in the chat and just check that she can? Great. Loads and loads of notes in. I can hear. Brilliant. Where was I? Prioritising equity, inclusion, and social justice, which, as I say, is our sort of shared North Star throughout this process. And like I say, it is a 10-year funding programme. Bless Zoe. 10-year funding programme with kind of equity and inclusion at the heart. And a big part of that is looking at who is involved in decision making. And as I've mentioned already, in this particular case, it's New Deal for Young People is having young people involved in that decision making process. I had to move my screen around. Oh, pop back. Thank you. There we go. And then this system-wide impact, this focusing on systemic change, is giving you guys as grantees the opportunity to really dig into what the root issues are and address them over time. And this idea of long-term funding, like I say, this is a 10-year programme with a view to eventually providing long-term grants so that you're not kind of applying year on year. And that these are kind of the things that we hope to be the legacy of Propel. Yes, we can jump forward, thank you. And then how do we do it? How does this happen? How will these ambitions hopefully be met? Which brings us to kind of why we're here today. So this round of funding is focused solely on the New Deal for Young People mission, which we're going to hear a little bit more about in a minute. In terms of the kind of key bits and bobs of information, we're looking to fund 25 to 30 deliver and develop grants in this round. The size and scale of those grants can be anything from 50k up to 1.25 million in total. These projects will all be 2 years long, focusing on expanding existing work. And so what that means is developing work that you're already doing rather than trying something for the first time. The focus of this round is on mentoring. And we're going to hear loads about that in detail, focused on disadvantaged young Londoners. And again, we've got a kind of list of what constitutes that definition. And in link to this idea of equity being at the forefront, we're prioritising organisations who are led by and for marginalised communities. And again, we'll touch on that in a little bit more detail. So if they're the headlines, we'll start to kind of eke into the small print a little bit. And I'm going to hand over to Dot from the GLA.
Hi guys, morning. Nice to see so many of you here today and some people that we've met before and some new faces, so welcome. My name's Dot and I work with my colleagues Sara, Leah, Shilpa, Bethany, Katie, Dave. You might have heard of some of these people or received emails from some of them. They're all part of the New Deal for Young People team, and we're all working together on delivering the New Deal for Young People mission. And that's one of the Mayor's big priorities as part of his mayoral term. And you'll be aware that the Mayor's mayoral term is coming to an end now, so he's really kind of pushing to deliver the New Deal for Young People mission as part of his promises through his manifesto. So there are two parts to the mission, and today we're focusing mainly on the top one on here. So we're working towards ensuring that 100,000 disadvantaged young people have access to a mentor. You guys working with young people directly will know in so much detail about some of the challenges that young people are facing. And that might be personal challenges, it might be challenges with school or home, but there's also the wider context, which is very difficult for young people at the moment, coming into a job market which is very tough, and an economic situation which means that living in this city is extremely expensive, costly, and there are worries and real hardships that come with that. And one of the things that we know is that building a trusted relationship over time can help young people to work through some of those challenges, to find the path that's right for them, and to progress towards what they want out of life. I'll talk a little bit more about how far we've got with that mission shortly, but although this mission is about mentoring, the heart of it really is built on the importance of supporting young people in London. They're our future leaders, they're the future workforce of this city. They need opportunities to make sure that they can thrive and that they can develop the skills they need. And also a recognition, and all my team are obviously absolutely behind this, about how important youth work, amazing, transformative youth work can be to young people. And we hear all the time through our peer outreach team, which is a team of youth, of young people who support the mayor and advise the mayor, bringing young people's voices into City Hall, but also through case studies from you guys and directly from young people about the importance of youth workers in their lives. So this mission is built on that foundation of youth work, but the angle is about mentoring, and it's about providing opportunities for young people so that they can move on to reach their ambitions in life. So with that top strand of the New Deal for young people, the mentoring ambition around ensuring 100,000 young people have access to real quality mentoring, we've broken that down into 3 strands that we're focusing on. So the first is about quality. And we know that structures and guidance that ensures that mentoring is of the highest quality means that the outcomes for young people are better. There's all sorts of different ways of delivering mentoring, and I know in this room today we'll have people who are running mentoring programs that deliver in all kinds of different ways. It might be peer mentoring, group mentoring, one-to-one, it might be online, it might be in schools and communities, and there might be all sorts of different focuses. But we want to support you guys to deliver the best quality mentoring that you can. And this is part of this sort of special opportunity, not just to fund more organisations, but to fund what can be a network of support and good practice with expertise being shared. So a couple of things that we've done to support the quality of mentoring in this city to be the best that it possibly can be is that we've developed a mentoring quality framework, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later, and I'll show you where to download it. That's a self-assessment tool that organisations can use to look at different areas of their practice, look at what they're doing really well, and look at areas where they might want to develop. And when we did the consultation with organisations about that, one thing they said was that they also wanted support to access the framework and training around the framework. So we've also funded a mentoring support programme, and I'll say more about it later. And then there's the quantity strand. So we have been lucky to have a mayor in place who is absolutely committed to supporting young people and who's invested £34 million so far in mentoring across the city. And this new funding, we've got a new funding pot. We've got £10 million to spend, and we'll be looking to reach around 10,000 young people if we can with that funding, and that's going to help us towards that target of 100,000 to make sure that in every borough there are opportunities for young people who need support to access great mentoring. And finally, thinking about the longer term. So one of the ways in which we have been kind of embedding sustainability in this programme is by partnering with other funders through this collaborative fund Propel, which actually has the ambition, as Louise said, to allocate 100 million in grants over 10 years. So that's looking at the longer term and trying to instead of working in silos with different funders kind of working separately to each other and lots of different application forms and different priorities, trying to come together to tackle some of the city's biggest problems in a more sustainable way. So a few little bits of more detailed information about what we've been doing, but I won't dwell on this too long. I've talked about the investment in mentoring, and some of you will have seen the Mayor's recent press release, which came out on Tuesday, announcing this fund. So you know that there's been a really significant investment in mentoring, and the Mayor's team have said that that is the biggest investment in mentoring in a city that has ever happened in the UK. We're also working with some of the kind of big institutions in London, Transport for London, the NHS, London Chamber of Commerce, the Association of Colleges, to bring those partners together, that sort of infrastructure of the city together, to see, well, what we're delivering this new deal for young people. How can these big organisations help us to do that? What benefits can they share? Are there mentors that could come from those organisations? Is there expertise that they could share? We've also, of course, we've needed to do quite a bit of detailed research to build this programme, and that's both been peer research and academic research, and I'll share links with that later. And we have needed help from you guys as well. So we, in March last year, we recruited 9 mentoring leaders who are really kind of highly skilled organisations that have a great deal of experience in mentoring, who are not just delivering more mentoring, but also supporting smaller organisations to develop their practice and develop the structures that they might need to kind of move to the next level and reach more young people. I've already talked about the framework and the support package, and we'll come on to that a little bit more later. So how are we doing so far? Well, that was a big target, 100,000. But as I said, we've got a team working on this. We've got some incredible organisations that we have been lucky to be able to fund. And that's meant that so far 50,000, it's actually over 50,000 young Londoners have had access to mentoring. So we're halfway towards reaching that target. But this programme that we are looking for applications for now will be part of reaching that target as well. And we're really pleased that 400 organisations are now using our mentoring quality framework. But more than that, some of the case studies that are coming through from the organisations that we funded are really both moving and powerful and give a proper flavour of the impact on young people. So I'd encourage you to have a look on our website, where you can, and there's a link on the slide, and we'll share this later so that you've got it, where you can see a list of the organisations that have already been funded. And you can also see a map of where the projects are being funded. It's very small there. So if you click on the link later, you can have a little look through. And we'd really encourage you to have a look there, because one of the things that we need to do through this process is make sure that there's a diverse reach and range of mentoring provision across the capital. So if you know that you're specialists in working in Hackney, for example, you are definitely going to want to have a look at what's already been funded in Hackney, which organisation it is, and which target groups they're working with, so that you can think strategically about, well look, if we've got an organisation that's already working in those 3 schools in Hackney, in that part of Hackney, and they're working with SEND young people, and that's what we were thinking of doing, that consider, because what we have a responsibility to do with this public funding is make sure that there are opportunities for the young people across the target groups that we want to reach, and across the city as well. So we've got the maps a little bit bigger here. I know that there's that font there on the right, though, is very small. So if you want to have a little look online, you can get a little bit closer. But that first purple slide, that was round 1. Thanks, Sarah. That's round 1. and it lists the organisations that we're funding through round one. And you'll see on there actually that there's quite a few schools, and that's actually through our Stepping Stones programme. Schools can't be the lead for this particular Propel funding opportunity, but that's why they're listed on there. And if you have a look at this second map, this slightly orangey coloured map, this is who are funded through round two of the New Deal for Young People. And this does include the organisations that were funded back in March this year through the first round of Propel. But again, you can see on our website, there's a spreadsheet where you can see a description of the project that they're delivering and the boroughs that they're delivering in as well. I'm going to hand over to Sara now to go into a bit more detail about what we're looking for and the criteria.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dot. Hi, everyone. Nice to see everyone this morning. Yeah, as Dot said, I'm just going to go into a bit more detail now about what we're actually looking for this round of funding and inside our application a bit. Sorry, I'm doing the screen at the same time. Oh, okay, cool. So yeah, sorry, I'm just going to be looking at the screen and speaking at the same time, but yeah. So some of the criteria that we're looking for within our funded projects. So projects that have high quality mentoring for disadvantaged young Londoners, aged 10 to 24 specifically. And as Dot mentioned before, young people who need the most support and might not otherwise have access to mentoring are ones that we would like projects to consider. And we really have an emphasis for mentoring on building trusting relationships over time. I'll go into, I believe, a bit of a definition of mentoring as well, just because we often get questions about what that looks like. But yeah, it is that sort of building that relationship with young people over a sustained period of time, not necessarily so much about that like drop-in sessions and things. As said before, it's a 2-year funding pot, which is commencing in December, so end of this year when we've rolled everyone through and got all the shortlisting, etc. done. So the funding available this time round is up to £10 million. So yeah, similar to the first round of Propel that we funded. Grants are going to be between £50,000 and 1.25 million in total that you can apply for. That can also be through partnership working, etc. If you're going for the higher levels of the funding, we would definitely encourage that. We have a limited budget, so we'll only fund a small number of grants at the 750,000 and above range, so that we can make sure that we get a good spread of projects, but also are fair and equitable with the funding amounts getting across the city. And we want to make sure there's a diverse reach and range of mentoring provision, as we've mentioned a few times now as well. Great, okay, cool. So our mentoring definition, you can find this, I believe, on our website, but we'll send these slides around as well. So how we specifically define mentoring, and we did lots of research and consultations around this at the start of our New Deal for Young People journey. So it's building a trusted and positive relationship with a young person over time. A good mentor uses that trust to motivate and equip a young person to change their lives, supporting the development of skills, coping strategies, and confidence. The skill and drive required to build transformational, trusted relationships is a fundamental principle of high quality youth and community work. A bit wordy on the end there, but yeah, hopefully you get the gist of what we're looking for. And then just a bit about some of the feedback we've had from young people, what they think mentoring means to them. So it's about having that sort of person that listens to them well and is empathetic. It's about them being able to develop skills and confidence and sustained relationships, and having access to opportunity and networks. So I'm sure everyone on the call is doing that great work out there. So we'd love to hear more about those projects. In terms of how mentoring can be delivered, we're pretty open to the different ways that people interpret that, but it could be one-to-one mentoring, group mentoring, e-mentoring online, informal meetings, sort of outreach work as well. We're open to different places by different types of people, peer-to-peer, volunteers, professionally trained, obviously in youth clubs, education settings, etc. As Dot mentioned before, lead partners in this round of funding can't be actual schools, but you can work in schools and deliver your mentoring in those kind of settings as well. And then we'll go into a bit about like outcomes and stuff like that as well, but different objectives for the young people. You can set those, so whether that's mental health support, opportunities and networks for them, or confidence and personal development, etc. Great. Okay. Target groups. So yeah, it's the age range between 10 to 24. We've got an illustrative list below of target groups of young people. We are open, obviously, to other groups of young people that could be targeted based on the local need and the delivery that you're doing. But just to name a few in here, we've got young people who are not in education, so NEET young people associated with gangs or impacted by exploitation, young refugees, SEND young people, excluded from school, etc. We'll give you this full list. It's within our guidance and FAQs as well, so don't worry, you don't need to memorize it all, but yeah, have a look. Okay, great. So in terms of what we're looking for outputs and outcomes, so outputs, ideally within this funding, we'd like you to reach over 250 young people within the 2-year time frame. That's been set because it's making sure that we reach as many young people or young Londoners as we can through mentoring across the city. We've got that 100,000 young people target, but we also just want to make sure that mentoring gets as far and wide as possible. So yeah, there is that 250 target. We have a caveat for that as well. We have funded smaller organizations or organizations that are working with young people with specialist needs or in certain circumstances, such as PRUs or like in prison services, etc. It might be smaller targeted mentoring groups. So do feel free to put your application in with that, but it would just be with more of an explanation around that smaller target reach. In terms of the outcomes that we're looking for, so we will send this over, but it's please do have a look at our VRU outcomes framework. It lists lots of different types of outcomes that young people could have. If you've been funded with us previously through the Young Londoners Fund, etc., you might have seen our previous framework, but this is the one we're using now. It has a lot of similar outcomes built into those. We have 6 suggested outcome areas, which are on the right-hand side here. So that's mental health and well-being, improving for young people, their socio-emotional learning, improving relationships, engagement, learning and work, and risky and harmful behavior lowering. So yeah, those are some suggested outcomes, but the illustrative list of all the different types of outcomes can be found on the VRU outcome framework. We recommend that you choose at least one of these for young people to have their journey through mentoring, and it is a validated tool. We also will give suggestions on different types of tools that you can use to track those outcomes for young people within the framework. But when you are applying and things like that, if you have questions, you can let our team know on outcomes. Oh, okay, great. I think that's all of my section. That's a bit of a whiz through of things to expect, but do feel free to pop in the chat if you have any questions about that, because I know that that's a lot of information to take in about it. But we've got, as mentioned before, a very detailed FAQs and guidance document as well, which goes through all of these. So I will pass over to Louise on how we apply.
Thank you, Sarah. So the nitty-gritty of how to apply, I'll just wait for that. Great. So for folks who've applied previously, you'll be familiar with our portal. If you're not, this is where you'll submit your application. It's worth mentioning that this portal has just been developed in the last year, developed entirely for Propel, and so it is a work in progress, but what that also means, within reason, we can be flexible and adaptable to people's needs. So what I'm not saying is email me saying like, hey, your portal, it's crap. Not that, but if you have got suggestions of things of how it could be or ways it could be improved, that is truly useful to know. In the last round, we had a 1-stage process, and a lot of the feedback that we had was that actually splitting the application form into 2 and having a 2-stage process we've done that in this round, and we've been working really closely with our tech partners to build this two-stage process. So we are kind of building and shaping it and working with the portal in response to your needs. So do let us know if there's ways and means that you think the portal could be improved. It's worth noting here before we move on that if you applied before, you can apply again. When you log into the portal, you can use previous, sorry, I'm getting distracted by pop-ups and things like that, messages popping up. It's worth noting that if you do log in with previous logins, you'll be able to see old applications. You won't be penalised for repeating any information. The questions are broadly the same as last time. There's a couple of little tweaks here and there, but broadly it is the same application, just slightly split into two. So you won't be penalised for repeating any information. You can access any previous applications and you can copy and paste. It's also worth saying, having said that, if you've applied before, you will have received feedback. So bear that in mind as you're filling in your application, and you know, make use of that. If we could move on to the next slide, great. So by splitting the application form in half, what that means is we've got an expression of interest, which is open for 4 weeks. So that is now open and closes on the 14th of July. I have noticed actually that the screenshot there has the wrong date, so you can ignore that. The actual 4-week application window of the 13th to the 14th is correct. And the idea of this is it's a fairly light touch understanding of just kind of what it is that you're wanting to do, who, with, and how. There is a kind of guide to word count on the application form, but it's not prescriptive. So if you would normally say around about sort of 250 words, again, this is kind of come from feedback from previous applicants. If you feel like you need to write more, by all means do, you won't be penalised. If you feel like you need to write a little bit less, also absolutely fine. There's only 3 or 4 questions in the expression of interest that actually require any real kind of depth. The majority are sort of just tick boxes, giving us a sense of where you're going to be working, how many people you're going to be working with. Where we're looking for that little bit more detail is why the work's needed, how it builds on work that you've done already, and the young people that you're working with. I start to think about stage 2. So everyone will be notified in August of the outcome of their expression of interest. If you're invited to stage 2, you'll have 6 weeks to complete that full application, and that window is from the 14th of August through to the 22nd of September. And this is where we start to dig a little bit deeper in terms of, you know, breaking down exactly what it is that you're going to do. There's loads of information, the guidance around this. There's help text on the portal that gives you an idea in a little bit more detail of the content that we're looking for in those questions. But as always, we're going to touch on support in a minute. If you do have any questions or you're not sure exactly what we're looking for, please just do ask. If you are invited to complete the full application, you'll also be invited for a clarification discussion with the funder, where you'll be able to, it's an opportunity for you to ask questions, but also for them to ask questions to you, and you will be sent any questions in advance as well ahead of that discussion. Is there anything else to add from GLA before I move on? Sarah, you've put your hand up.
Sorry, just quickly in that section as well. So yeah, as Louise mentioned, if you are invited to the full application stage, we'll also be asking for you to fill in the core indicators of the mentoring quality framework. Dot will go into more detail of what that looks like, but that's all totally accessible on our website currently. You can download it. Even if you don't get through to the full application, you can download it today. The core indicators there are 20 of them, and it is where checking on your mentoring practice, making sure that your organization is doing the best mentoring that you can. And yeah, we'll go into more detail about what that looks like, but we'll ask for that to be submitted with the full application at the same time, and that will be checked over by our team. In terms of the framework, it doesn't necessarily mean if you have the core indicators, we are looking for excellent or good practice to be ticked on those indicators as well, but we can provide support around that if needed. So feel free to be as truthful as you can on how your practice is going within the framework is what I would say. But yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. I knew I'd forgotten something, and it's like if I start looking at other tabs and things to see what it was. So just to go into a little bit more detail about these questions, some of them are really, are quite straightforward in terms of how many mentors you'll work with. What a lot of the kind of hows and whys, what we're looking for is to dig a little bit deeper into the kind of the planning stages of the application and kind of any kind of feedback that you've had from people that you've worked with previously. So from your experience of working with X group, why is this work needed? What's going on in those particular boroughs that you're looking to work in? Why is this work needed in that particular area? What information do you have that we don't necessarily have to understand the need in those areas? You're the people working on the ground. What is it that you know that we don't? In terms of who, we're looking at the project team, but also the mentors. Why are you best placed to do this work? And how will they be working with young people? But like I say, there's kind of clearer sort of breakdowns of this in the guidance. It's also worth noting as well that all of the budgetary information happens at stage 2. So all you'll be asked at expression of interest is how much are you applying for? You don't need to go into any kind of breakdown until the full application. So in the breakdown of the funding request, what we're looking for here is a sense of how you've got to this, how you've got to these numbers. If you're hiring out space, what's the, how many days at what cost? How are you working out the cost of mentors' time or whatever, for example. So it's about being really clear as to kind of how you got to that number, sort of showing you're working out, if you will. But we'll move on to the next slide if that's all right. Support, which is super important. So we know, and I certainly know from experience, that writing applications is time consuming, it takes up time, it takes resource, it takes up money, and we kind of take this support offer really seriously, as clearly demonstrated by the amount of people on the chat. There's a whole team of people to support you in writing your application. There's no question is a daft question, but it might be a frequently asked question. So it may be that looking at our FAQs or looking at the guidance is the easiest place to get that answer. But please, please, please do contact us if there's anything that you don't understand. For the more kind of logistical questions around the portal, the application form, or anything about Propel more widely, you can contact London funders, who, like I say, are kind of coordinating Propel. If your questions are really specifically tailored towards mentoring, the New Deal for Young People mission, the quality framework, the details are on there for the New Deal for Young People team. But then I've mentioned our equity partners earlier on, and this is really where they kind of come into play in terms of supporting you guys. So if you're led by a particular community, there hopefully will be a kind of relevant equity partner for you to contact. So we've got Inclusion London, who are here to support applicants from deaf and disabled people's organisations, LGBTQ+ consortium, who are on hand to support applicants from an LGBTQ+ background or community. Ubele, brilliant, they're on hand to support applicants from communities facing racial inequality. I really can't speak today. The Women's Resource Centre are there to support applicants from women and girls centred organisations, and then the lovely HERE network as well are there from people working across kind of intersectional issues. So all of their details are on our website. They're obviously on the application, on the PowerPoint here. You don't need to note them down. We'll send all their details out. But yeah, there's a big old team of people, and we just encourage you to read the guidance, read the FAQs. You're in the right place because you're kind of starting with one of these information sessions, but please do keep in touch and let us know if there's anything else you need. And then lastly, a bit of a timeline to give you a sense of kind of how this all plans out. So where we are now, around the kind of application stage for EOI, which is the 14th of July. The GLA will be doing their shortlisting from kind of July to August. Throughout August will be the sort of assessment panel, and we can ask a little bit more about those kind of questions around assessment a little bit later on, but that's when that's going to be happening through the summer. From August to September is when that shortlisting process will be happening, and for those who haven't been shortlisted, you'll be informed August to September. For those who have been successful and invited to stage 2, that'll happen around that time. September to October is when the clarification discussions will happen, and then in November folks will be contacted with their grant offer, or unsuccessful applicants will receive their feedback, and then projects will start in December 2023. Again, there's no need to write that down because it's all going to be sent out to you. But yeah, it's a long old process. So from now to December time, so starting to think about delivery happening in December or January. And then now I'm going to hand over to Jade from the GLA, who's one of our young assessors, and we'll be talking a little bit about that process.
Just check if Jade has managed to get the link. Maybe she hasn't been able to join the call yet. I'm sharing slides, so I can't check my emails.
No worries. I see Jade in here at the moment.
Pardon?
Jade isn't in
okay.
at the moment, no.
Okay, that's all right.
Shall we talk through these, Sarah?
Pardon?
Shall we talk through these Jade's slide and come back to her if she is able to join later?
Yeah, sure thing. So in terms of what Jade would like to talk about, because I spoke to her yesterday, so it might just be a problem with the link. So Jade was one of our young assessors who helped out with the first round of Propel and our assessment process in that. If she is able to join the call, she can talk a bit more about like how she found that process. But I guess in terms of how we involve young people in our assessment processes, so they sit in with us on the clarification meetings. So if you guys are successful and get through to that stage, they help us with that assessment for the final decisions of who is going to be awarded a grant. We take their opinions very seriously. It helps us determine who gets funded, and they often provide a perspective that we wouldn't have as just day-to-day grant makers. So yeah, they will ask some of the questions in that clarification meeting, and then we'll have a sort of breakdown meeting with us afterwards, and the panel to share their views and also tell us what they thought were the strong points or some of the development points for organizations that got through to that stage. We take that information and we bring it to our final decision-making meetings as well. So yeah, that's the main stage of where we will have our young assessors influence decisions. Jade is a peer outreach worker. So for those of you that don't know about that, peer outreach workers, there's about, I believe about 30 of them at any one time that are working with us in the GLA. So they are part of the Children and Young Londoners team, and they are young people from all across the city, diverse range of backgrounds, and they do tons of great work, including things like helping us with assessments, running big events, and trying to make sure that our work is really informed by and for young people. So yeah, that's sort of a bit of background, I think. Is there anything else, Dot, that we would say about that? Okay, cool. So yeah, we will have young people involved in different stages of the assessment process this time around, so do have a look out for them if you're successful in getting through to our clarification meetings. But if you have any questions about how young people's voices are included, please do let us know. There will be some questions as well in the EOI and full application about how your organization involves young people in your work, because we take that very seriously considering we're the Children and Young Londoners team. So yeah, great, okay. Useful tools.
Hi guys, I hope they're useful tools. You'll be the judges of that, I guess, in the long run. So we wanted to share a couple of things that might be useful when you are putting your application together, your expression of interest together. I know, looking through the room, that some people will have seen this or have been involved in developing this, or have given it a try. So thank you if you have done already. We have published online a mentoring quality framework, The link's there. I'll put it in the chat in a minute as well, so you can have a look. When you click on the link, it takes you through to a little form which captures a few details, and then you can download the framework. It's a self-assessment tool, so it's not externally assessed, it's not accredited, but it's there to provide a kind of baseline standard to help organisations develop their practice. And it highlights areas of good practice and areas for growth. It's a tool which organisations can use to create a development plan, and helps organisations provide the best support for young people. The framework has 8 standards as part of it, and each standard has a set of indicators that sit underneath the standard, and there are 40 indicators in total. It sounds a bit overwhelming, but if you have a look, what we've done is we have split those into core indicators, which our research and consultations suggested were the most critical ones for ensuring young people are safe, are supported, and are engaged in and learning from or developing through the mentoring that they're receiving. So just to kind of flag those core indicators, if you submit an expression of interest and it's shortlisted, we'll come back to you and we'll ask you, as well as sort of finishing off the application form, we'll ask you to have a go at completing the core indicators of the framework. As I said, there's 20, and you complete them about your organisation. And we'll ask you to send us a draft of it as part of the process, as we want this kind of quality standard to be embedded in all the work that we're funding. And organisations that are funded will need to complete the full framework as part of their two-year grant. But sitting alongside this, we've funded a mentoring support programme, which is being delivered by London Youth and Lifeline. So Lifeline is an expert mentoring organisation which delivers in East London, and London Youth is a membership organisation for the city. You guys, I'm sure, will already know it. And what they're providing is a range of workshops, masterclasses, and one-to-one support that sits around this framework, so that if you identify a few areas that you want to develop in your organisation's mentoring practice, there's that package of support there that you can access. They run a quarterly mentoring community network around different themes. They offer micro grants for very small organisations that want to do the framework but haven't got the resource to do that at the moment. You can contact them at mentoringsupport@londonyouth.org. And on the next slide, I think I've put the details of, it's a little bit further on, but don't worry, Sarah, I'll come to it in a minute. But they're actually holding a mentoring quality framework induction session. I think it's on the 21st of June. And we've put that on the slides, so I'll show you in a minute so that you can sign up and potentially go along to that if you've not used the framework before. I've also highlighted here the 2 pieces of research that we've had done. This one we're excited about because it was delivered by 9 teams of young researchers, and they were supported by Partnership for Young London to go out into the city and carry out pretty wide-scale research. So they reached 700 young Londoners. But the key thing was that they were looking at particular groups of young Londoners who are less likely to access youth services. So, for example, and I know that with some of our big outreach projects, we get a higher percentage of boys taking part, young men taking part than girls. So one of the things that this report looks at is, what are the barriers for girls in accessing youth activities? How can we make youth services more accessible for care experienced young people? And how can youth services support autistic young people? Those are just a few of them. There were 9 projects in total. And there are some really interesting, quick to read recommendations from those young researchers that they gathered from the young people that they spoke to. So I'd really recommend having a look at that. And the other piece of research is a piece of academic research that we employed University of East London to deliver. It's on the lovely, thanks Sarah. It's about looking at mentoring practice across the city, mapping gaps, best practice and challenges. And we've got on our website and we'll share the links to this, don't worry, a presentation that Dr. Darren Sharp from University of East London has prepared, which is a kind of summary. So both of those things might be worth having a little look at as you're thinking about your programme. So this is where it all is. You can download the framework there, you can get mentoring support, you can sign up to this mentoring quality framework induction if you want to hear a little bit more about it. And those are the links for the research, the 2 pieces of research that I mentioned. Just to answer Ahmed's question, as it's particularly about the framework, you don't need to start working on the quality framework at the EOI stage. However, I'm of course going to say that it would be a good idea to have a look at it. And, you know, it's free to download. You just download it, have a little scan, because it might help you with putting together the EOI. And actually, you know, even if it doesn't go through to shortlisting, I, of course, believe that it's a useful tool to look at and try and use anyway. I'm going to hand over now to Michelle and Maddie, who very kindly come along from Say Yes Mentoring, which is one of the organisations that we funded through the last round of Propel, and we've asked them to come along so that you can ask them questions about what the process was like.
Thanks, Dot. Good morning, everybody. I'm Michelle. Maddie's also here. I'm going to just give you a brief overview, answer a few questions that we've been asked to answer for you, and then any direct questions you want to ask us now. So very briefly, we run a remote mentoring or virtual mentoring program. So we work with various local authorities and other referring partners. Our program is one-to-one mentoring for 9 months for 1 hour a week. And we work with young people who are transitioning. We've been running since 2010, primarily in South Africa, and now also in the UK and in London for this project. The application process for us, we found it to be streamlined, clear. We love the short word counts. We didn't find, which you often find in funding applications, repetitive questions you're not sure about answering. This wasn't that. This was very clear and very, very simple and straightforward application. There's a lot of support every time you have a question from the team. And yeah, it wasn't a difficult application at all. And there is a lot of support when you have questions. There was a 3-month turnaround, so that was very nice too, and actually on time. So we got response exactly when we said we were told we were going to get a response. I also want to urge you to use the mentoring quality framework before, during, and after your application, whether or not you get funding. It's really useful. It's an excellent tool for any organisation that's delivering mentoring. So I really do urge you all to, for a starting point, go and jump into that and have a look. You'll really find it beneficial. We've been doing mentoring for a long time and we really, really appreciated it. The challenges, I suppose, if we want to call them that we found, there is a clarification meeting. If you get to that point, you do get the questions in advance, but I urge you to prepare for it. There is a certain amount of time to answer each question. It can be a little bit intimidating because the questions are put to you. You have about 3 minutes, I think, if I remember rightly, to answer them, and then a hand goes up when you've got to stop talking, and you might be tripping over your words a bit to get everything out. So prepare for that and maybe time yourself to make sure that you get all your answers answered correctly within the time and fully within the time. The other thing was we weren't sure about the definition of a young Londoner. We had to go back and forth a couple of times to find out exactly what that meant, because some of the young people we work with were not born in London, but are resident in London now. How long are they going to be in London for? Is that important? So just clarity on that is helpful. I'm not going to repeat what I think it is in case I get it wrong, but you should make sure that you get clarity on what the definition of a young Londoner is. Another thing is, a question we had was that the age range is 10 to 24, just so that you know, we don't work with the full age range 10 to 24, and that's that for the first round, certainly, or the round that we were accepted for. You don't have to work with that full age range. We work for a portion of that. We work with 16 to 24-year-olds. And then there are a lot of different entities involved here, from Propel, London Funders, New Deal for Young People, TfL, Mayor of London, London Youth Partnership for Young London. And my head was spinning with, what is the relationship between them all? And I understand it's been clarified at the beginning of this meeting, which was great, but still it's quite hard to grasp that, because there are a lot of them. But the New Deal for Young People is always our first port of call. And then if we need to be referred on to anybody else with questions, then they will do that. But yeah, that was quite a lot to take in at the beginning, all these different entities and their involvement, and where do we turn to? Maddie, do you want to jump in with any top tips?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. So yeah, really just to reiterate what Michelle said, I personally loved the length of the application form and the detail that was actually required. It wasn't too much, it wasn't too little, but I think definitely just a tip of, like, you know, it goes for all applications, but just really making sure like you fully know your project, know what you're applying for, because when there are those shorter word counts, I think just really pulling out those key points and making that they get across is just something that was really useful. And actually the shorter word counts, you know, it's only 200, 250, really helped kind of clarify what your program actually was. So that was super useful. And that just same point for the clarification meeting, as Michelle said, just really so you can be on point when you have those kind of shorter timeframes to answer in. And then the budget, for example, we had to submit, it was a kind of detailed budget, but, you know, not crazy detailed, but just again, just to make sure you have your detailed budget in the background, just so that, you know, you fully have costed out your program, because, you know, obviously if you're successful, that will go into the grant agreement. So yeah, that was another tip. And then the final one is just, like, as you can see, obviously there's so many people to get in touch with, and we've just found that so useful at Say Yes. So definitely to utilize, you know, any questions you have, we found that extremely helpful. So yeah, they're probably our top tips, but it was honestly a fantastic streamlined process, to be honest. So yeah.
Great, thank you so much, everyone. That's been super helpful for you guys to share that as well. I'm glad to hear that on the whole it was pretty streamlined. Can we see? Sorry, I can't see the chat, so I'm not sure if there's any direct questions for Michelle or Maddie. If there is, just feel free to unmute yourself and have a chat.
There doesn't seem to be anything specific to say yes in the chat, but again, just kind of holding that moment space if anyone does want to jump off mute and ask anything. And thank you again, both of you, for sharing.
Okay, cool. That's good to hear. Obviously very clear with the advice that you guys gave. So yeah, thank you. I am going to jump over. I can see that Jade has joined the chat as well. Thanks so much, Jade. Just in terms of if you'd like to share a bit of your experience about being a young assessor for the first round of Propel and how you found that process, that'd be super helpful.
Yeah, can you not hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, so I was a young assessor for the last round of Propel. It was a good experience just to be involved in the whole process of I guess liaising on who should get the grant, the funding. It was a good experience to also find out like all the different services that are trying to provide mentoring for young people. But I think the ones that stood out to me the most and probably got the best grades, like the best scoring from me, was pretty much the ones who have youth voice and youth participation embedded in their services. And when I mean youth voice and participation, I mean as in like, you know, having youth boards, young people having a voice in how the system of the mentoring goes, young people also being trained to become mentors or to become trainees, volunteers. Like that's always really, really like special to my heart to see and hear, because at the end of the day, like these services are for young people to thrive through, but at the same time we should be giving them opportunities to actually get employment and get, you know, these things on their CV and have the experience of them to help them for their work in life. I would say also the experience was also challenging, just like reading through everybody's like bids and things, or like their applications, but it's definitely something that I do on a regular basis, so it's become a lot more clearer to do. But I would also say as well, companies that also stood out to me was inclusivity, not limiting themselves to one group of young people. I know sometimes you can be a service who only works in one area, or a service that, you know, is, for example, a mentoring program that might just be for care leavers or for young women, but it needs to be the ones that stood out to me were the ones that were very clear on why they're targeting that group of young people and what their hopes might be to expand. It's always nice to hear that they are targeting this group of young people, but they have hopes of expanding it to X, Y, and Z, as well as just hearing about like experience of working with other organizations and how their sense of community is within their community that they're targeting as well. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks so much, Jade. That's really helpful. And actually the fact that you're like breaking down some of the things that stood out to you in the applications will hopefully help some of the people on the chat here. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that experience. But yeah, if anyone has any questions for Jade directly, or feel free to put them in the chat. Hopefully hearing for some of the people that helped us assess, but also were successful, will help all of you guys as well with your applications. Great. Thank you. Oh, okay, great. I didn't realize that. So we've, I think we've reached the end of our slides. Thank you for holding with us just now. But yeah, is there any direct questions for any of the team, for Jade, for Michelle, Maddie, any of us? Feel free to let us know. Now's a good time.
I can see a question from Richard has just popped up in the chat, so it might be nice to bring that live. Richard, I'm happy to read out your question unless you want to come off mute and kind of expand.
Yeah, sure. Hi, hello everybody. Yeah, really happy to expand. It's just a question. If we're looking at supporting and developing peer-to-peer mentors, but some of those might be just a little bit older than your 24 limit, but they would be working with young people who are up to the age of 24, whether actually those kind of, you know, training support costs for the mentors would be something that we could include in a bid.
I can come in on that one if that's all right, guys. It's Dot from the New Deal team. So yes, you could definitely include funding to pay the peer mentors for sure. What we couldn't do is count the peer mentors who are over the age of 24 as a mentoring output, as part of as one of the sort of the core outputs that you're achieving in terms of reaching the target. I don't know if I've explained that well, but so we'd fully, you know, we'd encourage you to have this support through peer mentors. And actually one of the things that research that I mentioned, Voices of the Future, highlighted was that young people want to have relatable mentors, and that sometimes having mentors of a similar age who are going through similar experiences can be really helpful. So yeah, you can apply for funding to pay those mentors, to train the mentors, to provide support for them. That's fine, in the same way that other programs might be funding kind of business volunteer mentors, but you can't count them in your numbers of young people who are being directly supported.
Thank you, Dot. It looks like Richard said that's all clear in the chat. I can see, Hannah, you've got your hand up, and then we'll come and answer Sam Broderick's question from the chat, if that's all right.
Hi, yeah, I'm Hannah from Young Ladies Club. Thanks, Jade, for answering my question in the chat, because it was about partnerships. Just because in the previous application form, you had a section to fill out with regards to partners or partnerships. I wasn't sure if that was a definite requirement to have a partner to deliver this work, or if it wasn't. But I think Jade said that it wasn't. But my other question was about the outcomes. If you have multiple outcomes out of the 6, can you list multiple outcomes, or does it just have to be one? Thank you.
Sorry, Jade, for some reason when I respond, it comes over as your profile. That's actually me, Dot, responding on that. So apologies, Jade.
Yeah, I was just about to say, yeah, I don't remember answering any questions. So,
I don't know why I have no idea why it's showing like that, but all good. So with the outcomes, you can definitely choose more than one outcome. I guess what we're saying is that we want you to have at least one from that group of 6 that we have listed. And the reason for that is partly so that if on a bigger sort of program level, we can gather data in a fairly consistent way. We want every project to do at least one of those so that we can get some data that we can kind of look at and analyze and report on across the whole program. But we know that there might be outcomes that are not on that list that are being achieved, and you can definitely include those, or you can include more than one from the list.
Thank you.
I'm going to come over to Sam Broderick in the chat again. Sam, I'm very happy to read out your question unless you want to come off mute and expand or chat a bit more.
I'm happy to ask it. So basically it's asking whether you have a specific definition of what you mean by overtime in terms of the mentoring relationship, and specifically the minimum duration that classes as overtime. In our experience, actually, even since the last bid we did, we work with several funders everyone seems to have a different definition of overtime. For some, it's like 3 or 4 months is a minimum period, some of which it's years. So it'd be good to get definitely, if you've got like a sort of a cut-off that's deemed sufficient as much as anything.
So we're funding projects, and I'm just thinking about what the sort of minimum length of time some of those are. Sarah, please jump in if you think this is not correct, but I would say probably the sort of shortest duration would be something like 6 months, and then we've got some projects that are working with people up to 18 months. So I guess that gives a bit of an idea, but it also, I know you'll know, it depends on the frequency as well, because some organisations are kind of seeing young people once a week or more than once a week, and therefore it might be a slightly shorter time. But our research shows that having that relationship sustained over a longer period, so 6 months plus, is more effective.
Yeah, I would sort of reiterate what Dot said there, just thinking about some of the projects that we funded recently. It's just, I guess it's not drop-in services or like, 2-week check-ins and then that's it. I guess it's also just thinking about where you think a young person will have a sustained outcome or an actual positive outcome from the mentoring, and how long you think as an organization that might take for a young person to develop. Yeah, so maybe it's just considering some of that as well.
Could I jump in with that question as well? I was just going to say on my behalf, like being a young person, if I was reading your bids or your application, I would want to know like I would want to know specifically like how long your mentoring is actually going for, and not the word of, I think the word that you use is overtime. I would rather want to know exactly like specifics. I think it's important because that ends up like that would make me want to use your application as something to go back to ask you. So I guess just kind of be very clear about that. And obviously kind of like shadowing on from what Sarah just said, like it's about that sustainable outcome for the young person. And you know, some also may need more time. And I think another thing that I realized reading throughout bids, like how do you then provide equity throughout your mentoring, because some young people you're going to meet may need more mentoring than others, and how is that going to work within the program or service that you're offering? So I would just say get specific about that, and yeah, just make it clear throughout your applications, because I know through the last ones that was something, a lot of questions I had. So that's what I would just say from me. But I'm gonna have to jump off now as I need to run. So is that all right?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jade.
Yeah.
You've been super helpful. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, we'll catch up. Thanks.
All right, bye.
Bye, Jade. Bye. I'm gonna come, Aminata. Sorry if I've said your name wrong, but you've got your hand up. And also thank you for the comment about the quality framework as well.
No, absolutely. And I do echo that. I said it in the first one, but just to say again, and then thank you. I just got a little bit concerned, and you said my name perfectly, by the way, with Zahid's comment around how long is sustainable amount of time. And that was useful to for that question. I guess my concern was with our previous bid and with our upcoming bid, we work with young people for about 4 months. So I guess my worry is that also, it's to help us to work with as many young people, but we also have youth centres, so we ensure that we encourage young people to kind of move on and transition into those so they can have kind of more group mentoring moving forward. But we do work with young people every single week, and we count the sessions, so we'll increase that, for example, if they miss sessions, so it won't necessarily be strict to the 18 weeks. Does that sound like a short amount of time? That just concerned me a little bit when the kind of 6-month period was mentioned.
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry, can you hear me? I think, you know, it's mainly, we don't necessarily have a hard and fast, like, sustained period, which, yeah. But if you're able to break down, as you just said there, the fact that you're working with young people for 4 months, they transition onto that group mentoring, it's, you know, maybe 1 or 2 sessions a week, we definitely consider those kind of things. It's more, I guess, if it's very light touch and you see a young person twice, that might raise some more questions for us. But yeah, I think, you know, in terms of what you've just explained specifically, that sounds fine.
Thank you.
Okay. And, you know, I would say to anyone on the call as well, if you have those kind of questions, not in your head right now, but you're thinking about obviously your very specific project and how to define that, do drop us an email. But actually how Jade explained it was a really good point. You know, putting in your application the breakdown of the types of mentoring that you're doing, the frequency of it, etc. We ask that so that we can get a really whole picture of what kind of project you're running. So yeah, that kind of breakdown in detail is really helpful for us, I would say.
Great. Dot Moonlight as Jade is frantically bashing out answers in the chat there, but I'm just going to pick up, in case anyone's isn't following the chat, I'm just going to pick out a couple of questions that might be coming up, if that's all right, that I just think could be relevant to lots of people. One from Hannah there, just around an email for any specific questions. Sorry if you can hear the rubbish truck just flying past my house. On the Propel website and on this document here, there's that page of who to contact. Just to reiterate, if there's any kind of general questions that can come to us, the Propel team, for really specific questions around mentoring or the framework or anything, they can all go to New Deal for Young People team. If someone from that team could pop the email address in the chat, actually, just because I might butcher it, which I think is just New Deal for Young People at gov. Do you want to say it? London? You say
London.gov.uk, yeah. Right.
If someone from your team could put it in the chat, that would be really helpful, and I'll put the Propel one in there. There's a question around, it's just kind of harking back to partners. If you're working with schools and community centres, would you like us to list out the names of the organisations? I think broadly, yes, give us a sense of who you're going to be working with. Specifics are always really helpful. I don't know, I think often there's kind of confirmed and unconfirmed partners. I think if you've got people confirmed, let us know who they are. If there's 30 schools, don't feel like you need to list them all, but I think giving a sense of who you're working with in specifics is really helpful. There is a question just come through there. Is the mentoring only to take place in the community, or can we start delivery from inside prisons?
Yes.
Yes, can be from anywhere. How would you break down the 250 young people engaged? Is there a limit on how many young people one person can mentor? I can see you've answered that in quite a lot of detail, but do you want to just expand rather than me just reading out your chunk of text?
Yeah, sure. I guess we know that your program, that just the first point on how many young people engaged, we know that your program might have both mentoring as part of it and workshops and attached outreach as well, and that those workshops and attached outreach, they might reach really quite high numbers of young people, but not all of those necessarily would have mentoring. So I guess when we're asking you about, and it is clear, I think it's clear on the form, it asks you about the number of young people who will have access to mentoring, who will take part in that mentoring over the 2 years. That's quite specific. So please don't sort of include all the young people that might come to a sort of workshop where you're promoting the mentoring, but where they're not actually building that sustained relationship over time. And then the other question was about the numbers of young people that a mentor could support. Well, what we know is that there are different models. Sometimes it's a volunteer, sometimes it might be a peer mentor, sometimes it might be a professional like a youth worker who's doing the mentoring. So it depends a bit on the model. And what I've said there is just to think really carefully about what's manageable to ensure that the young people have the best experience possible. I mean, we know that for some projects that we've got a youth worker that's going into school and they're a skilled youth worker, a skilled mentor, and they might be seeing up to 10 young people in that day. That's probably the most intensive model that I've seen in that way. But then we also might have projects where they're recruiting business volunteers, and it wouldn't really be appropriate that business volunteer is not necessarily going to have time to be working with more than one or two young people. So I guess it's just thinking really carefully about how you can demonstrate in your bid that you've really thought through how to ensure that the young people are carefully supported.
Thank you, Dot. We've got sort of 8-ish minutes left. If anybody has any, I mean, I know it's hard when you've just sat and listened, especially on a really hot day, to loads of information to then suddenly have loads of questions. I think just continue to open the floor if anyone has anything else they want to ask. Otherwise, yes, Sam.
One quick question about the funding itself. Obviously, you mentioned this is part of the Mayor's commitment and him putting all this money forward. The mayoral elections are, I believe, sort of this time next year, aren't they, for the next term? Is there any danger that with a new mayor that the funding could stop and just vanish partway through?
No. Yeah, it'll all go out as well before the end of his term, but no, it's committed funding. So yeah, it'll definitely happen.
Great, cool.
Yeah.
Really good question. Any more for any more? Looking for hands.
There's just one in the chat that says, is the 10 million from the GLA or one of the other London funders?
Yeah, so from the GLA, from the mayor, yeah, it's coming from us for this round. Yeah.
Thank you. Great. I can't see anything else coming in. So I'll just take a moment to say thank you massively for everyone for taking the time to come along. Huge thanks to Say Yes Mentoring for coming and sharing your experience. Obviously Jade's left, but thank you to Jade and all colleagues at GLA. Oh, hang on, there's more coming in. There's more coming in every time I think we're done. Let's have a look. Yes, we'll be sending the slide with the links. That's all absolutely fine. We'll send that afterwards. I can only see half of this question, this really long one, from Mark. Mark, do you want to come off mute?
Yeah, sorry, it's a bit niche and a bit long-winded. Right. Apologies. We're a national charity that was developed with the Innovation Unit and Department of Education. We support care leave from age 16 onwards. We don't call it mentoring, but we kind of work in a kind of a psychologically informed, trauma responsive way in a group work approach with groups of young people as they leave care. Once they become part of the house project, they stay and they're able, the support is never ending. So it's 16 plus, and we've kind of got 660 young people and supported 330 into houses, been evaluated by various kind of universities and Cambridge and psychologists and all that sort of stuff. So we're not mentoring organisation, but the relational approach and the kind of the ongoing support is built by trusting relationships. And so we're kind of wanting to work in London. We work with Islington. Islington have been a local authority for 7 years and have probably got about 65, 70 young people that have worked through the system there. So we're working with London about scaling and introducing projects to other authorities. And I just wondered whether the way that we work, we charge local authorities a fee for our services to get them to introduce these new ways of working. Would that make us eligible for this type of funding because young people would be benefit and mentored and supported? But I can see it's not we're not a mentoring organisation as such, but provide a holistic approach, which is wraparound psychology with that relational staff approach. Sorry, long-winded.
No. Also, other people on the team, please do come in if you want to. From what it sounds like, you're kind of working directly with the local authorities to upskill them. Is that right? I guess my question is because what we're looking to fund is the direct mentoring work. Yeah. Now, I think in a way, like the question about whether you call it mentoring or not is less of an issue, because if it is building trusting relationships over time and you can explain that clearly and that's what you're committed to doing, that I think would align. But I guess what the priority for this funding is to get those mentoring opportunities out to young people across the city. And so it's not a kind of capacity building program that we're looking to fund. You might have, I think that we could fund it if there was an element of that, but the priority was about reaching, in your case, care leavers through that longer term support. Right, okay. Does that answer your question? Have I understood it correctly?
Yeah, no, I think you have. I think that I was looking for a conversation with somebody rather than a kind of a hogging the floor here. But you're right, is that we do have a care leavers national forum, so reps come together. But actually it is the local authorities that we kind of add capacity, resource, skill, enable them to build those relationships with young people. So one of the problems we struggle with is that sometimes people think it's just an extension of local authority work. We're paying for local authorities to do what they should be doing, but we know this work doesn't go on. Hence, we're currently working with 20 local authorities who have kind of recognised this and want us to build this new way of working. I think the issue for us is that it's quite systemic in as much as we work with the cohort of staff within the local authority, but actually we're now scaling internally with local authorities so that service-wide change takes place, so that all care leavers are then supported in a relational way where that trusting relationship is built, which means that the benefits and the outcomes to the young people. But yeah, I mean, I wonder if we can take it offline and just explore that. One of the reasons for being here also is that we were both approached by Partnership for Young London, who wanted to inquire as to whether we'd do a joint bid. So I'm trying to really understand what that might look like in terms of kind of the whole really.
Yeah, I think I'd like sort of Dot was saying there, if there's really specific questions around that application and things, do just feel free to drop us an email and we'll try and get back to you as clearly as we can, I think. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I'm very conscious of time that it's now 1:30, but Michael, you've had your hand up for a little while. I just want to check if it's a question that could be, if it's a very kind of specific question to your application, or it's something that might be something relevant.
Quite a quick question. I'm not sure whether you'll actually be able to answer this, but my question is this: when we apply to potential funders, we often receive replies saying, although your bid was good, although the work you're doing is great, we receive many more applications than we're able to fund, and we can only fund a small number of the applications we get. And what I wanted to ask you guys is, as there have been 2 other rounds of funding in this sort of opportunity, do you feel that based on the likely number of applicants, there will be many organisations that will have to be disappointed? Or do you feel that given the funding that's available, organisations do stand a good chance if they do meet the requirements of being able to access funds?
I think that's a really good question and a really relevant question for everybody in the chat. And I think it's something that will resonate. I think probably even a lot of the people who are working at funders have been rejected in various roles before. One thing that we've tried to do this round to try and mitigate that a little bit is having this 2-stage process. It's a funny one because you never know how many people are going to apply. We certainly got more applications in that first round of this than we could have anticipated. Having said that, like I say, what we can kind of manage is how much I don't want to say waste, but how much of your time we take up with that application process, so that by bringing in that 2-stage process, people are spending a significantly less time and kind of being to be disappointed at an earlier stage, I suppose, if unsuccessful. In terms of going forwards, I think it's a case of constantly looking at the eligibility criteria and being really honest as well, and saying, actually, we received loads of applications from these boroughs previously. We're actually really keen to hear from people in these boroughs, for example, or we've heard of a lot of people working with these groups of young people previously. In order to kind of balance our portfolio, we'll be more interested in hearing from people from these areas. So I think you can never quite get a sense of how many people are going to apply, but I guess what we can do is manage expectations as best as we possibly can and be as transparent as we can. I realise that's probably not maybe the easiest answer, the kind of most helpful answer, but in terms of kind of what we're doing, we certainly acknowledge it. And also in terms of the feedback that we offer as well, and trying to be as clear and kind of considered in the feedback that comes through as well. So I hope that sort of answers the question, but it's certainly on our minds, and it's certainly kind of is part of the discussions that we're having as a collaboration, for sure.
Thank you. And I think people do appreciate having that different stage approach where we can submit an expression of interest, which doesn't involve weeks and weeks of hard work, and get a steer based on that initial approach on whether we have a chance of proceeding. So thanks.
Thank you very much. And thank you for asking the question, because I think it's a really important one, and it's certainly very relevant to everybody on the call, regardless of where you sit within an organisation. I think that's probably a really good place to end. I'm conscious it's 3 minutes past the time that we're going to finish. Huge thank you everybody for coming, for engaging, for asking the questions. Again, like I say, thank you to everybody who contributed. We will be sending out slides with all of our contact details and all that kind of stuff. So I think all that's left is to say good luck if you do choose to apply. And yeah, take care, enjoy the sunshine. And if you do have any questions, just keep in touch. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.